From Bitcoin, blockchain or distributed ledger technology to cryptocurrencies, tokens and initial coin offerings, it seems everyone involved has something to say, but can you really trust their advice? One man's had enough of weasel words and charlatans and is ready to give you impartial, independent analysis. With digestible blockchain bites, ICO analysis and need-to-know news on cryptocurrencies, author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate and award-winning software innovator Barry James brings you Radio ICO.
Hello, it's Barry James again. This is ICO Radio and the Blockchain Bites program. And today, well, this is a force of nature that I was blown over by recently. So I want to say welcome to Crypto Diva, Jillian Godsil. Well, welcome, Jillian.
Thank you very much. I was very tempted to go, hello. And then leave a big pause. So in whichever voice you choose, tell us a little bit about how you got here, a little bit about your background and how you ended up being a crypto diva and what that is and whether I can join or not. You can definitely join.
Okay.
I think the thing I like to say is that I only joined blockchain last September. So it's less than a year. We're August now, less than a year. And it's been a roller coaster since I jumped into it. But to explain why it's been so exciting, there's the very boring bit I could say. I've got 30 years of fintech experience. My first job was at JP Morgan in London. I'm Irish, as you can probably tell from my accent, but I moved over from Trinity to JP Morgan in London. I worked in Australia and I worked in Singapore. I came home. I worked for, in mostly PR. I started to do more and more writing, the journalism. And I worked for Iona Technologies, Ireland's first software company to float on NASDAQ. And that was a very exciting time. So I had a pretty traditional career. My husband at that stage, he was an Englishman. We moved down to the country, bought a big ruin, did it up. And then we lived happily ever after. Only we didn't.
Okay.
That was almost. I mean, you would think I had ticked every box, in my life's ambitions because I had two beautiful children. I had a husband whom I loved, until the marriage fell apart. I had a big old house in the country that we had done up, and the kids had ponies, and it was a very nice. I had a very very successful business. I was working hard, doing lots more writing, and I thought I had it all. And then sort of the cracks appeared in the marriage. And I think maybe I had a midlife crisis. I don't know. I was 41 at the time. And I went, I'm not happy. Why aren't I happy? Whoa. It was crazy. It was like something sledgehammer hit me. And I went, I'm not happy at all. So anyway, the marriage did not survive that realization. And then my ex went back to the UK. Because he'd never really settled in Ireland. In fairness, he wasn't. That happens sometimes. He didn't really settle, although we were there for about 15 years or so. But anyway, he went back home and he was happy at home. But then what happened was that was in 2008, and people may be aware that was the financial crash around the world, and we were caught up in it because we had borrowed money. We had a big house, we had a big mortgage. I was paying it fine during the normal times, but I couldn't withstand divorce and the recession at the same time. So he went back to the UK, became bankrupt in the UK, which, as you know, is only 1 year term of sentence. But in Ireland, it was like 13. Plus, also, he gifted me as a divorce present the entire debt on the house to myself and our two children. So I was trying to sell the house. When I moved out of the house, because I thought, what, the money's getting a bit tight, recession was coming, kids loved their ponies, couldn't afford everything. So we got a lovely stables and paddocks with a little house attached. You notice the importance. And moved in there because the kids looked after the ponies at home. And then I was trying to sell the house and I had tenants in there. And then things were getting very, very tight. The crash was happening. It was very, very difficult. And then the drug squad evicted my tenants. So I know. So okay. I couldn't really rent my house again because it was a bit destroyed and it's all messy and horrible. So I made a video to sell it, and the video I made was quirky and it went viral. And then I went viral. So I was all over the place. I was on every TV you could name. I was on Al Jazeera. I was in RT and BBC and TV3 at home. I was on BBC Two with Jeremy Paxman. They flew in a camera crew especially to interview me. And I was on Russia Today, did I mention that? NPR, everything. Because I kind of epitomized the face of austerity in Ireland. And also, in Ireland at that time, we were doing a very good job of shaming the people who were failing financially. Now, of course, we're in the middle of a global financial meltdown in 2008, but the banks managed to somehow say that somehow those Irish homeowners who were not paying their mortgage were somehow gaming the system, or there was moral hazard. So, mine.
Yeah.
It is evil. I know someone who goes on 3 foreign holidays a year, and they don't not paying the mortgage, not a bit of it. Why am I paying? Crazy, divide and conquer. And so what happened was, two things happened was, I got a cash offer to buy my house for this madness, whatever. So this video that went crazy, and someone gave me 500,000, and the banks refused consent to sell. They preferred to repossess it and then sell it for 165,000 a few months later.
Wow.
No sense. So of course I'm fighting the banks, I'm fighting my divorce, I'm fighting everything, and my business is collapsing. The bailiffs come to see me, they take stuff away. It's horrible. And in the midst of all this, I'm suddenly realizing, hang on, I am not ashamed. I have failed financially. It hurts like hell, but I haven't stolen, committed fraud, or done anything. I haven't mugged or done anything wrong.
Yeah.
And then everybody in Ireland would know someone who's committing suicide. Plus, also, just as a tiny political aside, the banks failed, but the government decided to give the bank guarantees. So you had the private banks failing, being bailed out by the public purse. We end up with 64 billion worth of debt, which was approximately 40% of the entire debt from the EU during the crash. We're only 1% of the population. We were totally done in. Anyway, so in the midst of all that, the banks got very powerful, and even though they had overspent and overlent, and the thing that got me too as well, there was no parity of risk. In the UK, if you hand back your keys, your debt goes with the keys. In Ireland, you hand back the keys, banks pursue you for whatever debt is remaining. And we had a lot of negative equity because the house prices got up. So in the midst of all that, I become politicized and very angry, and knowing people who were killing themselves because of financial problems. And I'm going, this is wrong. So when the banks repossessed my home, and for that sum, I had no assets and I had a huge debt. So I was the first female bankrupt under the new laws. They brought it in for 3 years. First female bankrupt there, and then I realized that we actually inherited your laws, UK laws, where if you are bankrupt, you're deemed unfit for public service. So you can't, that's why Jeremy Archer couldn't keep a seat in Westminster. So I went, excuse me. So I'd met a lot of people along the way. So I had gathered some barristers and solicitors who did public interest cases. And I took a case against the Irish government to the High Court and all the way to the Supreme Court, in which I argued successfully that my constitutional rights were being infringed and that I should be allowed to run for public office. And guess what? I won. So then I had to run for public office. So I ran. Okay.
Into a corner there, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I thought, okay, politics, interesting. So I ran in the 2014 European elections in Ireland's south, a huge constituency. And I ran on the pure of heart, anti-banks, anti-austerity, and not being, shamed into feeling bad for failing financially or anything. And I had a wonderful time. May I recommend to everybody to go and do that, because it's a lot of fun. And I got 11,500 votes. Didn't get enough to get me elected, but got enough to get me, it got my life back on track again in a bit, because I've been pummeled by divorce lawyers and banks and business collapse and bailiffs and all these things, debt collectors, all things, whatever. And then I went, I changed the law. I stood up for what I felt was right. A lot of people would contact me and they'd say, gee, you make us feel better. And I said, why? Because you're so much worse off than us. So I go, well, okay. And then running for Europe was very empowering, and I had a fabulous time.
It's interesting, isn't it? And this has got something to do with blockchain, I'm sure.
I know.
But we live in a system, and we've got used to a system where the banks do outrageous things and we feel shame, and where it's kind of, once you kind of stand back from the system far enough, you realize that it's designed to drain value, as well as money, but even more value than money because of the debasement and all the rest of it, from society into the hands of banks and corporates. Well, that brings us to blockchain, doesn't it?
It does.
Fundamentally, that's where it came from.
I have another 20 minutes to tell you about the next 2 years, but we'll skip them, right?
Yeah.
Very boring. So in September of last year, and I'm a kind of a slow burner. When I was in college in Trinity, I didn't go on any protest marks. I wasn't. There was the Dunn's store boycott of the oranges from South Africa when I was a student there, back in the dark ages, of course, because apartheid was still in place. I didn't do any of that. I loved my time in college, but I'm a slow burner. I got very, very angry, as I said, and whatever. So when I discovered blockchain in September of last year, I suddenly went, Mama, I've come home. This makes sense to me, because you know the way you look at the world and you go, how can you change the world? There's so many things that are wrong. And I use this new term, unthinking the world. Because we have to stop thinking that's the way it's always been done and it's the right way. Not necessarily. Now, there might be some things in it. I'm not like a true, what do you call them, a libertarian that wants to throw out the government and throw it out. I kind of like a bit of stability in there. But let's make
the revolution you're looking for there.
Yeah. Come Citizen Kane, come the revolution up against the wall. Or not Citizen Wolf. Remember Wolfie Smith? You know that British?
Oh, Wolfie, I remember Wolfie.
Yeah. Sorry, not Citizen Kane, got it wrong. But I suddenly thought, wow, just because it's always been done that way, it doesn't have to be. And I stumbled in. And the minute when I first heard about this, I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. This is interesting. And I jumped in so fast. I went to meetups. I went to conversations. I went to YouTube. And I was already a fintech journalist. So I was writing a lot of fintech stuff prior to that. And I had a lot of experience working in the fintech area. So I started interviewing people. And I started working for Crypto News. And it was interesting. The first few articles that I wrote, I had friends proof them because I said, I have no idea what I'm writing here. Is this? And I put in stupid things to say you can't say that because if you're in Bitcoin or into blockchain, you know that it's so obvious. Yeah. So I had a very steep learning curve. But then also the other nice thing I discovered too as well, being a journalist in this space because it's so new, you get to speak with all the top names.
Yeah.
I was interviewed CZ from Binance, and I've interviewed Kevin Abush, the Irish photographer who's also into blockchain, who sold that very famous potato picture for $1 million. $1 million. Very nice man. And then, Andy Chan from Gifto. It's a whole rake of really smart, intelligent, interesting, innovative, exciting people in this space. So that's a huge privilege.
And almost all, if not to a man and a woman, are there because, at least in part, they want to change the world.
Yeah. There's 3 reasons why I say I love this industry and blockchain. One is, I love the techie stuff. You got really clever brains in there doing clever things, and really all your AI and your machine learning and your self-driving cars, all that mad stuff, whatever. That's brilliant. And then you have the disruptive guys who are disrupting traditional businesses like, accountancy and insurance and banking. And that's very good too as well. And then you have the hippy-dippy do-gooders who are planting trees, eradicating world poverty, and doing all this. I'm going, yes. And it's actually it's tangible. You can feel it. It's not like we're not sitting there singing, maybe meditating, or maybe we are, I don't know, and with flowers in our hair. But I actually think I actually know these technologies can right a lot of the inequalities in this world. And that's so exciting.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us to women in blockchain as well, doesn't it? And I'm so glad. We were talking a little earlier before we started about the Women Unbound report that we did with PwC, and the shocking revelation for a lot of people that women are better at crowdfunding than men, and and all of the implications of that. And one of the conclusions for that, for anyone who's crowdfunding, by the way, and this goes for ICOs too, is if you haven't got a woman on your team, get one.
Yeah.
Women in blockchain. Talk to me about, first of all, it's great that there are quite a few. We need more, but tell me about women in blockchain. What's happening, and what should be happening? Yeah.
Well, I understand the figure that's been bandied about is 4% women only in blockchain. That's what I've heard. I don't know how accurate it is, but it's sort of got common currency at the moment.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was in Dallas at a conference. It's actually a HR conference, and they were talking about diversity in corporates. And if you have a company that's might be diverse at the bottom, and then as you go up at the end, you end with middle-aged white men at the top. Now, I've nothing against middle-aged white men. I was married to one once upon a time. They exist. They're lovely. I have friends who are middle-aged white men. But if that's who you have at the top, you're not innovating, and you're all thinking the same thoughts. And many of those companies who were listed on the stock exchange like three sort of generations ago, they're gone because they were led by middle-aged white men. And again, I'm nothing against them, but there's no diversity. The same way women, you introduce women and genders and there's gender, but ethnicity and all types of things. You introduce diversity, and the end result is much, much better. And what I was saying to you earlier, I think I gave a talk 2 nights ago in Trinity College in Dublin at a Women in Blockchain event. And I was saying to them, I told them my story that I've told you today. And I said, get into this business, jump in head first, put, blockchain in your LinkedIn profile, see what happens, see who knocks on the door. And when they ask you to cooperate, to work there, jump, say, yes, I'm going to do it. This sounds exciting. Figure it out as you go along. The people will help you. It's a very, very helpful industry. People are extremely helpful, actually much more so than in other areas. And even in ordinary fintech, in the blockchain, if you ask for help, 9 times out of 10, people will help you. Get in there. But what was interesting was that people were saying, I don't know if I'm good enough. And it goes back to this thing where if you see a job advert and a woman sees a job advert, and if she thinks, I've got 70% of the skill sets, but I'm not going to apply. I don't have the other 30%. They kind of back off a bit. Yeah. Whereas a man goes, I've got 70% of those. I'm going to go for that job and rock it, And there's been loads of studies that have proven that women tend to self-doubt themselves and are less confident and stuff like that. So when I was at this conference, at the talk, the Women in Blockchain the other night, I was saying, go for it. Don't be afraid. There are many people who you might know enough, but you'll know as you go along. If you have an interest and a passion in this area, of course you'll learn, and very, very quickly. So I think we need diversity. And also, if I can digress, and this is like a Walton style story. I was in church last year, and the rector was collecting for the bishop's appeal, and he said it was to go to educate women in developing countries. And the reason he's very, he went and talked on it. The reason why they do this is because especially in a developing country, now the Western world is a bit different, but in a developing country, it's very stark. If you educate women, they get better jobs. And when they get better jobs, they put more into their family and into the community, and you raise the entire community. So I sound as if I'm anti-man. I'm not at all. But women need to get in here because it's, if I may use that terribly coarse expression, it's too much of a sausage fest at the moment. We need more women in there who are going to make it more egalitarian, who bring just different things, different strands, different, and it's not that women are softer. It's just they're different. Sometimes they're tougher.
Couldn't agree more, and there's lessons all around that from the report we were just talking about. But I don't want to talk about that. Tell me though about Women in Blockchain as an organization, and is that an open door for women who want to get into blockchain as well?
Yes, this is a meetup run by 2 young women. They're actually not even Irish. One's Japanese and one is Brazilian, Camilla and Yoshi. Great kids. They're very young. They're only early 20s, I think, whatever. And they've been pushing this door open, getting people to come and talk about it. And I admire them totally. But I think wherever there's an opportunity, it's like I find increasingly that, and it's not. I should stress too as well. I was in Amsterdam earlier this year at a talk, and we were asked, myself and my friend Morgan Pierce, who's also in this area, we were asked, what do we thought about the glass ceiling? Now, ironically, even though I'm sort of making all these noises, I've never actually experienced the glass ceiling. I've never found it an impediment to being a woman. Now, I've never found it as beneficial as it is now, but I've never actually found an impediment to be a woman. So I think, it's hard to quantify, but sometimes maybe is it self-limiting, or maybe there are, I'm not quite sure what it is, but I see increasingly there's organizations online, women in blockchain, and go and join it and just talk, because we need to bring our sisters with us as our brothers too as well. But, we need to, 4% is too small for this wonderful, transformational, life-changing technology and sector.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that came out of the Women Unbound report is this whole area of unconscious bias. The bias is built into our culture and is in the background of our thinking. And I think this applies certainly to men, but probably to women as well. And there's that whole area. And it's quite interesting, and I could talk about that for hours. But let's just go back to women who might be listening to this. And moreover the sisters, mothers, aunts, and others of other people who are. Why should they? What's good about this? I mean, I know what I think is good about it. But from them and from your point of view, why would they want to do that?
Okay, wouldn't you like to change the world for better? What an invitation! I mean, that hasn't been put on the table for since the Second World War, I think, since the Industrial Revolution. There hasn't been an opportunity for ordinary people to really make a difference in this world. And if you're a woman, you don't have to be a parent, but if you are a mom too as well, there's a double incentive, because you want your kids to enjoy this earth, to be able to survive on this earth, let alone, that we don't kill it with all this global warming and the pollution and the plastics and all the rest of it. So I mean, that is huge things. Ordinary human beings, we can change the world and make it into a better place.
And of course, you're living proof that you don't have to have a long, history of cryptology or be steeped in the thing, or be 19 anymore to do.
No. I mean, in some ways, I'm such a newbie. I'm less than a year in this area, and I do have I have to say, qualified. I got 30 years of fintech, whatever. But I'm less than a year in blockchain. But like this last year, I have been speaking and chairing at conferences all over the world, in Kiev, in Amsterdam, in London, in Oman, in Dallas. And next month, I'm going to Sri Lanka and Burgundy. And this month I'm going to Croatia to Liberation.today, this amazing sustainable blockchain DJs and music. I was saying to you earlier, a very trendy conference. I will be so out of place, but I can't wait to be the geeky one.
And as you said, I think it's gradually dawning now, and this is even more pronounced than back in the late 90s. I mean, we look back now, and we realise this was the time when the next wave was going to be formed, that was going to change the way everyone not just transacted, not just worked, but lived as well. Actually, we can see it coming now, can't we? So, exactly as you said, isn't this an opportunity of a lifetime?
Yeah, because it's also interesting. You see, a lot of the educationalists are saying now that we need to change education too as well. It's another bee in my bonnet, but we're educating kids for jobs that won't exist.
Yeah,
and we're educating kids for jobs that we can't even imagine. So not only will these, like, you can understand that you're not going to be working in production lines. It'll all be factories and they'll all robots. That's comprehensible. But imagine there are jobs that we haven't as yet even comprehended.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like that's scary and interesting at the same time. It's like, wow, and that's for kids who are starting school now, because they won't retire till 2070 or something like that. That's a huge amount of time. That's just, like, the mind boggles just at that. It's like, whew.
Yeah, we share some of the same interests and hobby horses, I think, in that, yes, absolutely, we have an education system that was built for a world that actually no longer exists. Not just disappearing, it no longer exists. And for a static, that's a dynamic world. And it's very dynamic. What should we do about it?
Oh, well, I think we should totally overhaul the educational systems, which is easier said than done. There's have you heard of is it the Sudbury schools? It's actually from the US. There's one opened here in Wicklow recently, where the children self-select what they want to learn. Mm. That sounds so counterintuitive. What, you mean the kids say, I want to do physics today? And, and they do obviously a lot of, use the online facilities. There's a lot of stuff on there. You can learn YouTube, whatever. But can you imagine the children self-selecting? Now that sounds, if you'd said that to me, say 10 years ago, I would have said, no, that doesn't sound right at all. Let them learn their history and let them learn the thing, let them do their maths. But in actual fact, it actually makes sense, because my brother actually is a very strong educationalist, and he's always talked about skills-based learning, strengths-based learning, because in the current system, again, if your child is bad at French, what do you make them do? More French. You give them grinds in French, so they get their points for their leaving cert to go into the university system, and that makes no sense. So, but I think we know it. Changing it will be harder. We know, because the systems are very rigid. Perhaps like these Sudbury schools, perhaps like they will spring up and they will become alternative centers of learning as opposed to the traditional schools. I don't know. It's a big question, but there's so much change coming. There's opportunity there as well.
Okay, so we're kind of coming towards the end. So let me just ask you about the future, and vision for the future, and hopes for the future. You clearly find hope in this change that's being brought about by this new interaction between society and technology. Where should that take us? Where do you see that taking us?
Well, do you know what's interesting? It's kind of like there's a bond, a coming together of two different thought things. One is the technology that is so transformational, unthinks the world. And also, we have lived in a world I think since the Second World War, in capitalism, where it's gone wrong, right? And capitalism has always been like, it's always the scarcity model. So we fight over the same thing. I've got this one pen, but you can't have it, and you've got to fight over it. If we operate from the position of abundance, guess what? I've got a pen, and when I'm not using it, you can borrow it, So if you turn around, because there is enough food in this world to feed everybody, there is enough land in this world, there's enough houses in this world to house everybody. And if we unthink what we've been doing and figure it out and say, let's figure out ways of changing. So I'm really hopeful that we can stop thinking in that horrible Trumpy way and start thinking instead, in a much more generous way. And it's not, let's be generous, still, you can still earn money, you can still have nice things. I'm not saying have nice things, but let's be more generous. So I think that's where the world is going.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, when you kind of look at that, at economics, we have moved beyond that. And, when I look at this, I can see the human creativity. We have all that food because of human creativity and agriculture and so on. And it's increasingly clear this applies in so many different areas. And my view is that the greatest and most wasted resource on the planet is the people who we don't give the tools and the opportunity to reach their potential.
Yeah,
that's my final thought to leave with listeners.
Ditto. I'll say I agree.
What about you? If there's one thing that you'd like people generally, or women in particular, women and girls in particular, to take away from this interview, what would it be?
Have a go. Go on. Why don't you? Have a go.
Have a go, Jillian. Love it. Jillian Godsil. Crypto Diva, thank you so much for this interview, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon.
Thank you indeed.
ICO Radio was brought to you by author, speaker, transparency and clarity advocate, and award-winning software innovator Barry James. Get in touch with the programme, put yourself or someone else forward as a guest, visit iconewsdesk.com. And if you've enjoyed the show, please leave a review. And don't forget to subscribe to get your next insights and interviews from the ICO Radio podcast.